I am so excited to introduce my guest to you today. Her name is Jennifer McDaniel. She's a registered dietitian and wellness consultant with over 20 years' experience. What I loved about our conversation was how Jen was able to share her wealth of knowledge about all things wellness and nutrition, but in a very ADHD-friendly way, and also very much aligned with my own coaching, philosophy, and approach. In this conversation, Jen and I talk about my own personal struggle with binge eating from teenage years, as well as getting really deep about food cravings, dopamine, and how to support our ADHD brains. I truly believe you will get as much out of this conversation as I did. Jen has such passion for her work. It's honestly infectious. Enjoy. So, Jen, I just want to ask you, for listeners who may not know your work, can you share what inspired you to focus on nutrition and wellness in the first place?
Oh, I love that question. Yeah, really early on, actually. When I was growing up, I was a gymnast. And once I got to the high school age, I began really curious about how to support myself as an athlete. And I read all of the health magazines. I loved playing in the kitchen and concocting all sorts of different sorts of of menu ideas for myself. And my mom and dad both worked, and my mom would teach piano lessons in the afternoon. So quite often my sister and I would have to fend for ourselves in terms of making ourselves dinner. And I got really tired of the microwaved Swanson, turkey, peas, and mashed potato and cranberry sauce that we have here in the States. So I would start cooking for, my sister and I based upon my experimentation and that curiosity around that. And then that kind of grew, and I had an experience a little later in high school, around my junior year, the third year here in the States for that, where my dad had a procedure where he had a quadruple bypass surgery. So he had almost a massive heart attack. And then it was less about performance, and it was all about, wow, this curiosity around nutrition and supporting health, and probably a little fear involved in that too, fear for him, fear for my own self. And when I brought all of this to my high school guidance counselor, I was like, I'm really interested in nutrition. I'm interested in the relationship to preventative health. She was the one who said, well, there's a position called a registered dietitian out there. And I'm so grateful for this, because that was so long ago when really this was a very, very new profession. So I went off to college knowing that is what I wanted to do. And I never looked back. It's always been something. The field of nutrition is always evolving. And I love the science aspect of it. And it's just always, there's always something new. So, so pretty much, I have early teenage years, and just really loving the connections between food, nutrition, cooking, performance, and health.
Wow, that's really interesting to hear. Especially, I didn't realize that you used to be a gymnast either.
Well, yeah. I wasn't that great, but I did like it.
Yeah. So I was just wondering, as you know, my audience have ADHD, and so when you were just talking about your interest in nutrition and nutrients, is there anything you could share that could be helpful in terms of how my ADHD audience could really support their brain? Because obviously it is a lot about really doing that, with and trying to really get the healthiest brain we can in terms of the dopamine and giving ourselves the most support. Is there anything you could, I don't know, talk about in terms of that?
Yes. I'm also fascinated by this too. And by this, what I mean is the connection between our gut and our brain, often referred to as the gut-brain axis. And what we know is that, 80% of the neurotransmitters that are in our body, are produced in the gut. And so the health of our gut influences the health of our mind, and the state of our mind can also influence our gut. Right before I came on this podcast, I'm wanting to do a good job. I'm feeling maybe a little bit nervous. Where do I feel that? I feel that in my stomach. And that is, we are home to trillions of bacteria. We're actually more bacteria cells than we are human cells. And so, in this role of looking at how do we support our gut, that also in turn can help us with inflammation in the brain. That can help us with our mood. That can help us with cognition and clarity and memory. So I focus a lot on this topic, not only for my clients who might be diagnosed with ADHD, but anyone who suffers from, say, irritable bowel syndrome or mood disorders. When we focus on nutrition for the gut, we therefore support the brain and its function too. So what does that look like? How do we support the gut? First and foremost, it's a variety of different types of plants that we eat. And when I say plants, I don't just mean vegetables and fruits. I also mean whole grains and nuts and seeds and beans. Anything that has fiber is going to be the preferred food for our bacteria. Bacteria love fiber. That is what helps them to become more diverse and high functioning. And there was a really large project called the American Gut Health Project, where they did samples of those microbiomes for people. You have to do a fecal sample, then you test the microbiome. And so we kind of were able to see, what does a healthy microbiome look like? And so when those healthy microbiomes were identified, those people were eating about 30 different types of plants over the course of the week. So fiber is huge. The other thing that is really important are anti-inflammatory fats. And by that, I might refer to omega-3 fatty acids that we find in fish are supposed to be very helpful for the communication between the neurotransmitters and the brain. So also a nutrient very supportive for brain health as well. And then there's some important nutrients that we see can tend to be a little lower in those who are diagnosed with ADHD, like the iron that we have. So some people are walking around with low iron levels, and that can exacerbate ADHD symptoms. Okay.
Yeah, me. I was just diagnosed with low iron and vitamin D. Well, not diagnosed, but kind of.
Yeah, your lab showed that your levels were low. Yes,
Yeah.
And vitamin D is the other one that you just mentioned, as well as magnesium. So
oh,
yes,
and magnesium. Yeah, sorry. I was like, yes, me.
They all know I'm telling the truth now. We have case study N of 1.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, and there's other things that affect our gut health too. Everything from movement. We know that people who move regularly tend to have more diverse bacteria. That's really a diagnosis of what does a healthy microbiome look like. Something called alpha diversity. And alpha diversity refers to the balance and the richness and the variety of the different types of bacteria that we have in our microbiomes. We don't want like one type of bacteria in huge dominance, and we don't want really important bacteria that are in our gut not to be present at all. So we're wanting a variety, and the best way to kind of grow that gut garden with lots of different beautiful flowers is to be able to eat lots of different plants, to move our bodies, to get good sleep. Sleep is also really important, and to quote unquote manage stress as best as we can. I really don't even like the word manage stress because I don't even know what that means. But I think being self-aware of that and how can we support ourselves, because a high period of stress can alter the microbiome in a negative way as well as some, I think, anti-inflammatory medications, things like ibuprofen, Mobic, like some of these powerful anti-inflammatories and NSAIDs can be really harmful on the gut microbiome too. And I think that's something that's not advertised enough, because a lot of people take that, oh, I got a little bit of a headache, let me take some ibuprofen. That's not really great for the microbiome either, as well as alcohol and as well as, of course, antibiotics. And antibiotics are really important. We need to take them when we're sick, but we don't need to take them just because we think we might be getting something, So those are kind of the pros of gut health, and then the things that sabotage our gut health, and then therefore the health of our brain.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's absolutely fascinating. And I just love the way you talk about it when you were saying like the flower and even using the word the diversity, it's kind of like chimes with the whole neurodiversity thing.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah.
Hello, I am just going to pop in here and let you know about my group coaching program, which is called The Academy. The Academy is an inspiring and supportive space where I coach like-minded ADHDers. We explore everything about living with ADHD, and you will receive personal coaching and support directly from me. I've been through the challenges of ADHD myself, and I love sharing the lessons that I've learned to help make your life easier. So I'd love for you to come and join our amazing ADHD community and learn and grow together. There's a link down below to join, and I hope to see you soon. The thing that is coming to mind for me though a little bit is because even when you were sharing all that, I think the thing with ADHD is they can get really overwhelmed with a lot of information and feeling like they have got to do all these things at once and not knowing where to start. And so I just wondered, is there anything you could share about yes, that all sounds like great information. And I think we'd love to do all these things, but sometimes you can almost shut down, feel a bit like paralyzed and not know where to start, or just feel like, oh, I need to do everything. And so yeah, what would you kind of say to my listeners that might be struggling with that kind of overwhelm?
Yeah. And let me also say, I think it goes beyond even the ADHD world, right? Like so many people come into my space feeling completely overwhelmed with the amount of information that they have at their fingertips, whether it's, podcast world or whether it's social media, influencers in the wellness space that are giving out information. It's so much content. And it can be very hard to sort through that content, especially, even for myself, who, I should have a scientifically trained mind and be able to look at the evidence and weigh whether or not that's, credible. But that's tricky even for me sometimes. So I think to start, I just say, find a couple of people that you really trust in the space of health and wellness, and maybe mute the rest of the content, because that creates so much unnecessary stress and it causes so much complication. And when we think about how people ate, 100 years ago, 50 years ago, like no one was evaluating how much protein I should be getting. And am I getting enough of this nutrient and this nutrient? And information is power, but I think there's also stress that gets, increased when we've got all of this stuff that we think we should be doing. So my role when clients come in is to try to simplify that. And when I say eat 1 or 2 more servings of vegetables a week, that is so boring and unsexy and not what you're hearing on social media. But that's the game changer. Like it's the simplest things. Like, are you getting enough sleep? Like that is more important than, yes, supplementing with those nutrients that you and I just talked about, whatever, that can be kind of an easy fix. But we don't need to do all of these things at once. And sometimes we just need to focus on doing a couple of things consistently. And I really think consistently is an important word here too, because so often people will try something for a couple of weeks and then something shiny and new will come up and be like, oh, never mind. Like, I'm going to try this and see if that works, for whatever works. Maybe it's weight loss. Maybe it's trying to have, a more grounded mindset, whatever the goal is. We don't often give it enough time. Our bodies are so complex, and we need to think about trying things on for size for years before we say that didn't do what I thought it would do for me, and that can get kind of boring sometimes too, especially with maybe the ADHD mind, who's more likely to want to kind of grab all those things. So I guess what I'm saying very long-windedly is like trying to simplify this, not trying to do everything at once. And knowing that's actually way better to do something small on a consistent basis, on a more regular basis. Did that answer your question from the perspective of having ADHD?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, and really you're kind of naturally going into it, which was something that I also wanted to ask you, was about the consistency. Because I think we all know it's so important to be consistent with things. But ADHD it's one thing that, consistency is something like, it's like a stick that we beat ourselves up with. Like, why can't I be consistent? It's like one of the hardest things. And so I can just imagine my listeners now kind of saying, yeah, it's all very well just like saying consistency is important, but how do we, how can we build that in a compassionate way around food if we are struggling to build that consistency? Is there anything that you found that kind of helps people maybe to I don't know, be consistent, but maybe inconsistently, if that makes sense, or like something
Sure.
around that where
Yeah.
there's people that do struggle with that.
Mhm.
How is there any kind of workarounds that you found, or things like that?
Sh- Sure. I think I'd like to just start answering your question by saying, we don't have to be perfectionistic in these tendencies, and it does need to work for the individual. And so, coming around and sort of beating ourselves up, I know you do a lot of the work around helping people realize how just undermining that is, how not helpful that is.
Yeah.
And so I want to use the example of exercise. So say someone is trying to be more consistent with exercise. We want to build the spontaneity into that, right? We want to build in, okay, well, I don't need to have this narrow definition that exercise needs to look like going for walks and strength training. And those are my two things. Like, what if I want more? What if one day I want to go to a dance class? Or what if one day I want to just work out from home? Like, giving ourselves permission to just meet ourselves where we are in the moment, but still trying to like have that movement be part of the daily experience. And in order to create maybe that consistency, sometimes my clients might habit stack. So they might be like, when after I eat lunch, is this time that I always do something with movement? So it helps me to remember that that's what I'm supposed to do. I know I have some of my clients who will just like get knee deep into work and they'll forget to eat. And then they'll realize, at dinner time, they haven't really eaten much all day. And then they overeat because that's normal biology. That is a normal protective mechanism that when we get to a certain level of hunger, we are going to eat more than we intended to eat. So that might be like, okay, I've got some of my clients, they just set little chimes that go off around their meal times when they like to eat. And it's just a moment to pause and to sense themselves. And I think being more intuitive with our eating and less cerebral and more, what is my body asking for? But giving yourself space and time to actually sense that is really helpful. So if a timer goes off at 8 and 12 and 3 and 6, as reminders that this is really important for me to eat for my good energy levels, to eat so I have balanced blood sugars. And we know that having a balanced blood sugar is therefore going to help our mind work better. So like the habit stacking, the little timers, letting yourself have permission to have things be more spontaneous, reminding ourselves there's no one perfect way. It doesn't have to look a certain way to be so-called right. And doing something is often just good enough. So maybe lowering our bar a little bit with the whole thing.
Oh, you're really speaking my language. Yeah, everything that you said, that is kind of what I talk about. But obviously, I'm not specifically talking around nutrition, but I have so many of my clients that struggle with habits, and habit stacking is something that I always talk about, like how that helps so much, doesn't it? That we've already doing something to then add, something onto that, because trying to build a habit out of thin air is just almost impossible, isn't it? It's just like, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it really makes so much sense, everything you've said. And also coming from that place of compassion, letting go of the perfectionism. I love it. And yeah. And so, yeah, another question that I kind of was coming up for me to ask you was, people with ADHD, like, I'm sure you know this, like they are seeking dopamine, like, because the dopamine is dysregulated. And I do have a lot of clients, and myself, I was that person that really struggle with intense cravings. And I wondered what you see about that, like how can we support ourselves with that kind of thing, with the feeling like we, are having those cravings, and not really knowing how to, deal with that.
Yeah. I think I'll answer this in two parts as well. The first part is, I think I'll start with setting ourselves up right. And, a lot of times we have definitions or belief systems around what is healthy and what is not healthy. And we put foods in categories, good, bad. And to me, it can be very helpful to lose the labels lose the label of this is junk food, this is ultra processed, and more so just call the food what it is, right? To have a more neutral relationship with how we view food, how we talk about food. Because when something becomes, bad, then, or high sugar, or I'm addicted to this, like there's an intensity and there's a story around that I think sort of exacerbates the situation, and we
Yeah.
can't help our conditioning. We can't help how we see food, right? Because everyone has their own upbringing. Everyone has how their parents raised them with food. Were they rewarded with foods as little kids? Were sweets removed when they weren't good? Did you have to eat all of this before you could have this? So we can't really help the lens that we have towards that, but I think we can notice that. We can be aware of how are we viewing food? How are we talking about food? And what happens if we just stop, saying we can't have something? Because the more that we try to restrict or not have something, the more that we want it. So I think we want to be able to, I love sweets. I love sweets. I have sweets at least once a day. I build them into my meals. I have lunch and then I might have some chocolate almonds and right now candy corns because it's like past Halloween here that we still have in our house. So just they're built in. They're not like restricted and then all of a sudden I lost all control and now I'm going to have all of it, we need to make sure that we're eating enough of the serotonin producers, of the carbohydrate rich foods, that we're not just completely restricted, that we have grains and we have fruits. And going back to the gut health, right? Because a lot of times there's even research out there that shows that when we eat more fibers and we improve the gut health in that way, that can help the cravings in the brain as well. So we don't want to restrict. We want to give ourselves the things that we enjoy and when we build those in with some element of permission, we're less likely to go crazy with those. The second part of that I would think about talking is like, what is when we have a craving, if there is an opportunity to be with that before we actually find ourselves with the hand in the cookie bag. If we can notice, oh, I just had a thought that I really want some cookies. What does that even feel like in my body? Can I sense that? Can I sense where that craving is located? Does it have a shape? Does it have a texture? Does it have do I feel like sometimes I feel like when I personally have a craving for something, I literally feel like I'm kind of being pulled from the chest over to the food or something. So just even feeling it, right? Because when we give the body the chance to feel something through, it can allow us to just slow the whole thing down a little bit and then maybe make the decision, well, am I hungry? Oh, I'm not hungry at all. This is just a craving that I'm feeling. And just because my brain had that thought doesn't mean that the brain dictates what I have to do all day long. It's literally just a thought. So I can just see that as a thought. I can go into my body because that's the trusted vessel here, not the thoughts. So what is my body telling me right now? My body's telling me I've got a little angsty going on, or maybe I'm feeling like my heart's beating a little bit faster, but that's just feelings and safe. And you can handle that, right? And so then maybe you'll say, what I actually need is to get outside and get some fresh air. Or you might say, I want some cookies. And then you go have cookies and that's fine too, right? There's no wrong or right response. But I think if we can sort of slow the whole experience down and just try that maybe like once a day or a couple times a week, we build this resilience muscle where we can realize that just because I have a thought about wanting something doesn't necessarily mean that that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of what you're talking about relates so much to my coaching with people with ADHD around other types of addictive behavior and also for what you're talking about, like when you're saying about feeling the craving in your body. And this is what I talk about so much with my clients, like almost every session is not so always the craving. Sometimes it can be, but like feeling our emotions, knowing that all emotions are safe. And I think sometimes that people can think that having a craving, it's like it's urgent, it needs to be solved. And that's coming from our brain. And isn't it telling us, oh, we need to solve this. We need to fix this craving. And the same with difficult emotions or feeling what they might feel like difficult or uncomfortable, but they're not necessarily, are they? If we allow them. So it sounds like that's what you're saying, and I
Yeah.
really like that.
Right. And then I think, the reason why we turn to food quite often when we're bored or lonely or sad or happy or whatever is because it works. It works. It does change something in our brain and it does make us feel better. So that also, I think, needs to be acknowledged, that we don't do things that don't somehow, help us. And maybe the help is just a short-term help, though. And long-term, we don't want that to be the only way that we cope with a feeling of discomfort in the body that we don't want to be feeling, or we don't even realize we don't want to be feeling. So I think that lends, or it opens it up to just a touch of self-compassion there too, right? I wouldn't have been doing this if it wouldn't have been helpful to me. But now I can see that maybe doing this all the time isn't the only way that I want to support myself when I'm feeling a certain way.
Yeah, I love that, because I was thinking, like, for me, I know this was my experience, a very much all or nothing kind of way around thinking about food for most of my life. And I don't know if I've already shared this with you, Jen, but from the age of 13 till like my mid 40s, I did have like I would now sort of look at it and call it a binge eating disorder. But I didn't really know that's what it was called. I just had a really unhealthy relationship with food, and it was totally all or nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm hearing you talk about is just to have so much more like compassion and balance around that. Whereas I would be, it's almost like I had two voices in my head, one telling me, you need to stop this and it's disgusting. And the other one going, oh yeah, just eat the food and you need it and you want to zone out. And it was like this two like voices,
Mm-hmm.
and neither of them were like actually my real self, as we know.
Exactly.
And it was, yeah. And I can see now that it wasn't even ever about the food. It felt like it, but it was more about some kind of control and safety, I think, coming like from my childhood. And yeah, and I know that a lot of people with ADHD have similar issues around food, particularly like binge eating and those kind of struggles with this all or nothing kind of behavior. Because
Yeah.
I'd either be really strict and on a food, it didn't matter. Sometimes I called it a diet, and then it went to, oh, I don't believe in diets anymore. But I was still trying to restrict myself somehow, and I can really see that now. That and yeah, so I just wondered. All right, yeah, and then the other one for that is then I was just completely like, absolutely, I'll just eat anything I want. It was like I'd almost put myself in a prison, and then something would happen that I would escape from the prison, like go to a party or something. And then it was like, well, why would I ever want to go back to that prison? So it'd take me ages to like get myself just to eat. There was no kind of normal. It was like this either really strict behavior or this really out of control behavior. And I really see this a lot with my clients, not just with eating, to be honest, with lots of types of different kind of habitual patterns. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I just wondered, have you got any, I don't know, words of wisdom for anyone that, I mean, I don't struggle with it so much anymore. It still does come up. When I lost my husband to cancer 2 years ago, I saw the old kind of echoes of that coming up, like with comfort eating and emotional patterns. But it was not like how it used to be. I could kind of like, yeah, sort of see it in a more gentle, compassionate way, I think, that
Mm-hmm.
what was going on there. But yeah, I just wondered, I've probably got a lot of listeners that do relate to that all or nothing, and then the kind of like maybe something like binge eating or something around an eating type disorder, or just an unhealthy relationship with food. So have you got
Yeah.
anything you could share that might be helpful?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Like, I do see a lot of all or nothing thinking. I see a lot of rules that were created, and it does go back a little bit to what I was discussing earlier about our conditioning and wondering where that came from. And not that we necessarily need to like figure it out and go back and do like, therapy around that. But I do think it's interesting just to see all the different rules that we have. And sometimes I've even had clients like write out every rule that they think that they're trying to abide by, and it's pretty crazy when they look at the list. of how many things. And you're right. It feels like a prison. It feels like it's as far from empowering as it possibly could be. But then it also feels quite fearful to say, well, what if I don't have rules? How will I know? How will I know how to go about eating and feeding myself? And I think we kind of break those rules one at a time. We don't just say, screw all the rules. We're not going to do any of them. Just be a free eater. That would be lovely. But we might just sort of work on one at a time. Maybe a rule is, I shouldn't have breakfast in the morning, and I want to intermittent fast, so I'm not going to have breakfast. I'm just going to skip it. And but they're hungry in the morning, and it takes all their willpower to get to lunch, and so they've got this rule in their mind, and it's all or nothing. It's just like, that's what I've been told. I've learned all this great data about fasting and how so good it's for my brain. But they're like, that their body is telling them everything else. The body's saying, but I'm hungry in the morning. And then by the time you get to lunch, I'm overeating, so we might just be like, hey, how about we look at that rule around that piece of how you're doing things, and we flex it, and we just give it some time to try it on for size. And there's really no one right way. I mean, there's some things that I probably have beliefs around that are like eating enough plants, I think that's important, getting enough fiber. So I've got my own belief systems too. But even that belief system isn't right for everybody. Some people, when they have that many plants, they have lots of GI issues, So it's kind of like, number one, seen through the rules that we have. And I'm sure you've probably heard of Byron Katie's 4 questions.
Oh, I love Byron Katie.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a cool thing to be able to do, is to work through, is it true? And how do I know it's really true? And when I think that truth, what does that do to my actions? How do I react through that? And then if I never even had that rule or that belief, how would I be in this world? So sometimes we might do work around just sort of really tearing that rule apart in that sense. And then we might just look at, how has all or nothing served you? How has it helped you? And, like you were just saying, upon reflection, you can see how it was sort of keeping you stuck. And I don't necessarily think we can rush life and rush our understanding and our unfolding. So there's also just bringing curiosity to it without saying something is completely wrong or right. And letting things just have our aha moments as they come. And something that I was curious about as you were sharing, if you had this for so many years, how did you come to see that wasn't helpful for you? How did that unfold for you?
Wow, that's the $1 million question. Yeah. It was a huge journey, a lifelong journey, I'd say, that I'd probably still on it a little bit. Like I say, because it does sort of creep in again sometimes, but not in a way now, because I know we share the understanding around, having our innate well-being is always there. And I think that has helped me so much, really, to see that. Yeah. And to know that never meant anything about me. It was just, like you say, thoughts, like you said earlier. And none of those thoughts are me. They're not my identity. And so the cravings can be there, and I could feel them. And, I don't have to actually listen to my brain telling me to act a certain way. It's like, oh, okay, thanks, brain. It's like you said, there's a lot of conditioning there going on under the surface. But I think it was just a process of, really, it started for me just understanding more about this all or nothing kind of thinking, and it was coming from a place of not accepting myself. And so when I learned to really accept myself for who I am and know that it didn't mean anything about me. To be honest, it was never really about my body size. I know I have a few friends that have real sort of body issues, and that came from their conditioning, a lot from their parents that were also like that. But I never really had any conditioning around that. It was more about, like I say, I think more like about control and safety somehow. Like you said, the rule thing really resonated, because I had so many rules, and it was, like I was trying to follow this, like you said, who made the rules up? Where did they even come from? And so I think it's so empowering, isn't it? Once we start to see these things just fall away, and you just see that it's all made up anyway. And it's so powerful. So actually, it just kind of brings me on to, I wanted to kind of go into a bit more of the spiritual side, that I know that we share this common understanding. So how, like, if we are thinking about this busy mind that we have, especially, again, a lot of my audience would have a busy mind and a lot of thinking. How do you feel that, we can nourish ourselves into like more simplicity, let's say, and more ease around food and exercise and all the self-care things, even beyond a busy mind? Like, is there anything you would share? Does that make sense? I
Yeah,
feel like I've
yeah.
just gone a bit
So
around the houses with that question, but
no. So
yeah.
kind of what I'm hearing you say is, outside of just not paying attention so much to our thoughts, are there other things that we can do to sort of ground ourselves?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I do think. Have you heard of this way of intuitive eating? And have you heard of that
Yes,
expression
I
before?
have. Yeah. Yeah.
So intuitive eating is, to me, not trusting, but being with the wisdom of the body,
Mm.
and letting our wisdom kind of guide us. I mean, I do realize that everybody has different sensations of being with hunger and fullness. Some people, and that's actually genetic. We do genetic testing in our private practice. And one of the things that we can look at is the genetic influence over our ability to sense our hunger and fullness hormones, leptin and ghrelin. So when we eat food, as we go through a meal, leptin rises, helping us to notice our fullness. And then after 3 to 4 hours of a meal, we should start getting hungry. And so that's the rise of ghrelin, letting us know, okay, you're starting to get hungry. So the ability to sense that is pretty unique from one person to another. But the more that we can sense ourselves and sense our bodies and sense our energy and the degrees of sensitivity of hunger and fullness. Like, I always show this hunger and fullness scale to most of my clients, and it goes from 1 to 10, and 1 is like ravishing, I'm going to eat my arm off, and 10 is like, I'm so full, it's like, the biggest meal ever, and I'm going to bust. So we obviously don't want to be at either one of those spectrums. We want to be somewhere in the middle. And when we notice that hunger is starting to build, not in our mind, but in our stomach, we might feel like just a little bit of like a growing sensitivity of hunger in the stomach. And then that's really when we should start eating. That's when we should start planning. We don't want to wait until hunger is like hungry and then we overeat, because that's a natural biological response. So I do think, from what I have understood, that ability to sense ourselves can sometimes be harder for the ADHD brain for multiple reasons.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. I was just thinking that when you were saying it, that self-awareness is one of the things that can be really tricky with ADHD, and also, like, people like hyper focus and forget to eat, and then, like you said, literally what you said about like getting to that real extreme of like
Mhm.
then being hangry. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so the more that we, like, kind of going back to that timer conversation, if we have little cues in our day, whether it's sticky notes on our computer, the basic self-care question for me is like, what do I need? What do I need right now? And do I need food? Do I need water? Do I need to go pee? Like, what is it? What do I need? Do I need just to like close my eyes and bring the environment out for a little bit and just kind of be with myself for just a minute? But anything that we can do to just sense what's going on for ourselves. And I will also say, as you mentioned, these are always hard things to put words to. But for me, I always sense the kind of the stillness running in the background. There's a calm, there's a steady, there's a stillness always there. Now, I might not be able to sense it all the time, but that's kind of what you were talking about, how I might describe just our our health. And by health, we don't mean the health of the body with like good cholesterol. We mean just like the health of the energy or the universe, or however we want to say, that we all share. And so even kind of just being with that, knowing that is always present. So that helps me to kind of slow down and sense myself. I think too, for me, getting outside is really helpful. Like getting fresh air is where I feel always more alive and in touch with myself. And so that's for me, but like, what is it for others? What is it for others? Is it just like sitting on the couch with a pet and just being with our pet for a minute? But anything that we can do to sort of bring us to who we are aware, and sense that throughout the day. The more that we can kind of sense that throughout the day, I think that helps with it's kind of like pumping the brakes throughout the day, a little bit, and allowing that parasympathetic nervous system, that rest and digest, to be more at the forefront than always running around in sympathetic fight or flight. And that I think is can be tricky, but we just need these little cues maybe to sort of place. And it does. And we're not really, I know that this is probably another shared understanding, but I don't really believe I'm in control of any of this either. I don't really believe that I'm the doer of all this as well. So little seeds are planted in life and then they sprout sometimes. And so I think probably what you're doing with this podcast and what I try to do with my podcast is just like sprinkle some seeds for all of us so that maybe these things will unfold and these things will happen for us.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like it's so aligned, everything that you've talked about, because the next thing I wanted to ask you, and it was like almost like you read my mind. I was going to say, like, a lot of the suffering I've seen with myself and with my clients comes from our trying to control things, and that then you were just saying that you don't even feel like we are in control. So how do you support people in relaxing that control and being able to trust themselves more deeply? Because I think that's where, ultimately this trying to control it is because we don't really trust ourselves, do we? And we're trying to control all these external things, including, eating. You could see that as an external thing, even though we're putting it into our own body, but it's still something we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I do think that is so tricky. I mean, I honestly don't always talk about that with clients unless they've come to me with some level of desire to know that.
Yeah.
Because I think it can be kind of scary for some people to think I don't have control, or they think I'm crazy if I'm like, well, you don't really have control anyway. Like, what do you
Yeah.
mean? I chose this lunch today.
Yeah, I
You
absolutely
know,
agree with you. You got to be
and
careful, you don't say that to
yeah.
everybody. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I
Yeah.
mean, we can always walk it back and we can definitely give like examples of how that might be. I mean, you chose to have a salad for lunch today with chicken on it. What if you were never ever given a salad as a kid and you never even knew that you liked salad? Were you in control over that? So you can always like peel back the layers to help someone see that that control is kind of an illusion. But I do think that that can also be disempowering for some people if they don't feel like they've got that. For me, it's completely freeing. It's completely freeing in every area to know life unfolds. And if I am, and life's going to go the way it's going to go. But I do think, like, if I'm thinking about like this analogy of kind of going down the river of life, me trying to control things is like putting the big boulders in the middle of the river and like stopping things up and resisting and like getting in the way of natural life flow, So I think trusting yourself is always kind of I definitely get that. And I like saying that, but I also don't like who's the self to even trust is also kind of tricky, but I do think, going back into the body and being like, well, if I'm noticing hunger and I've kind of got these things in place where I'm going to sense myself, I will choose something. And then the other thing that I think is really important is for us to pay attention to how we feel when something is completed. Like the other night, we just had this most random dinner, and I ended up having ice cream for dinner and then like popcorn after that. And I did not feel very good. I didn't feel so great. And it really went against the grain of how I normally feel after I eat. And so if we pay attention to how we feel when we do things, there's like this like natural intrinsic education that happens, and then a growing desire to move towards the things that help us to feel our best. And so I think that that's something that's really helpful too, is just not only to pay attention before we do something, but then to sit and think, how was that for me afterwards? And then maybe those natural unfoldings and, doing in the right way, kind of start to happen a bit more.
Yeah. Yeah, that really makes sense. And I think, I just think that it's all really, if we've already know that we are part of nature, like we share that understanding that we are the universe, that we're all one, then it really makes sense then, doesn't it? Just to kind of be more, just to kind of know that wisdom's got us, really. This, there's the higher wisdom that is the source of everything. And it is relaxing, like you were saying, relax those rules a bit more that we might have put on ourselves. Mm-hmm. And just really feeling what's naturally our body wants to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, Jen, I think we're kind of coming towards the end. This has been such a great conversation. Is there anything that you would like to share with anything else that's come up for you that you think might be a good place to end?
No, I'm incredibly grateful for your work. I love how you say gifted with ADHD. That's so beautiful. I think, I shared in my podcast with you that I have my youngest son has ADHD, and it's been really fun to learn how he learns and see how he views the world. And of course, there's challenges that come along with that, but there's challenges that come along with all things. And I love the lens that you have with this and the gifts that you share with others. So just really grateful for your work. And I know you don't work with kids, but someday I really hope my kid comes to work with you, because he doesn't listen to his mom.
Well, no, they never do they?
No.
Oh, well, this has been great. And I just want to sort of ask you, if you've got any, if people want to connect with you and if they're really interested in working with you, what's the best way that they can do that? How can they connect with you?
Sure. I love the Substack platform. I don't know who, Substack is kind of newish, but that's where I do more of my long form writing and really let things flow there. And so certainly there is a good place. And I know you'll put the Substack handles and all those things, but I think it's if you just look up my name, Jennifer McDaniel, that could be found easily. And then our company, McDanielNutrition.com, is where we do our nutrition services. And there's, 5 of us on the team, including myself. And so that's another good place. And then, we're on Instagram. And as much as I don't necessarily love the social media platforms so much, you can find us there. But more so Substack, I think, is where I like my happy places.
Oh, it's funny, actually. My other guest that I had on a couple of weeks ago, he's really into Substack as well now. Yeah. It seems to be the place to be. So, yeah.
As of today.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Jen. And and to my listeners, thank you for listening. I hope you got as much out of that as I did. That was brilliant. So I'll see you next week.